Hello, everyone. I'm Eleanor Thompson, a 62-year-old grandma from the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. Have you ever thought that by the time you hit retirement, when you're supposed to have left life's biggest storms behind, something could come along and turn your whole world upside down? For me, that moment came when I discovered my grandson, Ethan, the boy I loved and took into my home, had been secretly using my credit card to spend thousands of dollars of my life savings, and then had the nerve to say, "You're old, Grandma. What do you need all that money for?" Those words cut deeper than a knife, but they also woke me up. They set me on a journey of heartbreak, forgiveness, and rediscovering who I am. Stick around to hear my story, how I faced betrayal, took back control, and learned to love myself again. And please, drop a comment to let me know where you're listening from. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss what's next. 5 years ago, when my husband, George, passed away, I thought I'd already faced the hardest chapters of my life. After 35 years of marriage, filled with laughter, tears, and the chaos of raising 3 children, I'd learned to navigate the silence of an empty house. Retirement was supposed to be my reward, a chance to cherish quiet mornings with a steaming cup of coffee on my porch, to tend my rose garden, and to lose myself in the novels we discussed at the local library's book club. I'd spent decades working, first as a school teacher, and later in the city's administrative office, saving every penny to ensure my golden years would be comfortable. I wasn't wealthy, but I had enough for my modest home in Charlotte, my medications, and small joys like Sunday brunch with friends or a trip to the farmer's market. Life felt steady, predictable, until Ethan arrived. Ethan, my 24-year-old grandson, was a stranger in many ways. I hadn't seen him much since he was a boy, when he'd cling to my hand during summer visits, his eyes bright with curiosity. His mother, my daughter Susan, had always struggled with him. Susan was a loving but troubled soul, battling depression and the fallout of a bitter divorce that left her and Ethan in a home filled with tension. I'd hear snippets of their fights through tearful phone calls, Susan's frustration, Ethan's rebellion, but I never grasped how deep the rift had grown until Ethan stood at my doorstep one chilly October evening, a tattered suitcase in hand, his face etched with exhaustion. "Grandma," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I can't stay with Mom anymore. She doesn't understand me, and it's just chaos. I need a place to stay, just for a bit. I'll figure things out, I promise." My heart ached for him. He looked so lost, like the little boy who'd once needed me to bandage his scraped knees. How could I say no? I opened the door wide, ushered him into the warmth of my home, and told myself I was giving him a lifeline. I imagined late-night talks, helping him find a job, maybe even rediscovering the bond we'd lost over the years. But as I watched him drop his suitcase in the guest room, a quiet unease settled in my chest. I had no idea I'd just invited a storm into my peaceful world. At first, I chalked Ethan's behavior up to youth and adjustment. He was messy, dishes piled in the sink, socks strewn across the living room, takeout containers littering the coffee table. My once tidy home, where I'd spent years perfecting every detail from the lace curtains to the polished oak floors, began to feel like a stranger's. Ethan spent his days sprawled on the couch, eyes glued to a sleek new Xbox I couldn't fathom how he'd afford it. When I asked him to help with chores, mowing the lawn, cleaning the garage, anything to contribute, he'd sigh, "I'm exhausted, Grandma. and sink deeper into the cushions. I tried to be patient. I'd raised teenagers. I knew they could be self-absorbed. I told myself Ethan needed time to heal from whatever had driven him from Susan's house. I cooked his favorite meals: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, peach cobbler like George used to love, hoping to spark some gratitude, some connection. But Ethan's responses were curt, his eyes distant. He'd mumble thanks, then retreat to his games, leaving me to clean up alone. I began to feel invisible in my own home, like a housekeeper rather than a grandmother. The first real warning came at the grocery store. I swiped my debit card to pay for a week's worth of food, mostly for Ethan, who seemed to devour everything in sight, and it was declined. My cheeks burned as the cashier politely suggested I try another card. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. I'd always been meticulous with my finances, tracking every expense to protect my retirement savings. That evening, I logged into my bank account expecting a clerical error. What I found was far worse. Transactions I hadn't made. Hundreds spent on online stores, a $1,200 charge for a flat-screen TV, and recurring payments for video game subscriptions. My hands trembled as I scrolled, the numbers blurring through tears. I hadn't bought these things, but I knew who had. I wanted to believe it was a mistake. A hack, a glitch, anything but the truth staring me in the face. But as I sat in the dim glow of my computer screen, Ethan's smug grin flashed in my mind, and I knew he was stealing from me. The next few days were a blur of dread and denial. Ethan's behavior grew bolder. He came home with a pair of gleaming Air Jordans, the kind that cost more than my monthly utility bill, and bragged about a new gaming headset for pros only. I watched him, my stomach churning, as he lounged on the couch, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Finally, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I printed out my bank statements, circled the fraudulent charges in red ink, and confronted him one evening as he played his games, the flickering screen casting shadows across his face. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaking despite my resolve, "we need to talk. These charges, thousands of dollars from my account, the TV, the games, the sneakers. You've been using my credit card, haven't you?" He didn't look up, his thumbs still working the controller. "What are you talking about, Grandma?" "Don't lie to me," I snapped, slamming the statements on the coffee table. "This is my money, Ethan, my savings, everything I worked for. How could you do this?" He finally paused the game, his eyes meeting mine with a chilling indifference. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said, leaning back. "You're old, Grandma. What do you need all that money for? I'm just having a little fun. You're not going to live forever, you know." The words hit like a physical blow, stealing my breath. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as his casual cruelty sank in. This wasn't just theft. It was a betrayal of everything I'd given him. My home, my trust, my love. I wanted to scream, to grab him by the shoulders and shake sense into him, but I was too stunned. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I turned and walked away, my heart splintering with every step. That night, I lay awake, Ethan's words echoing in my mind. How had my sweet grandson become this stranger? And how had I let myself become his doormat? The days that followed were a fog of anger and grief. I couldn't look at Ethan without seeing his smirk, hearing his dismissal of my life's work. I'd spent 40 years building my savings, sacrificing vacations and new cars to ensure I'd never be a burden in my old age. I wasn't rich, My nest egg was for essentials: taxes, doctor visits, the occasional treat like a matinee at the community theater. Ethan had treated it like pocket change, as if my years of labor meant nothing. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was a theft of my dignity. I knew I couldn't let this continue. I'd been too soft, too eager to play the nurturing grandmother, hoping love would fix him. But love hadn't stopped him from crossing every line. I wasn't going to beg or cry anymore. I was done being a victim. It was time to take back control, not just of my money, but of my life. That's when the idea struck me, bold and terrifying in its clarity. I would do something I'd never allowed myself. Take the trip I'd dreamed of for decades. Savannah, Georgia, had always called to me. Its historic squares, oak trees draped in Spanish moss, the gentle lilt of Southern charm. I'd clipped articles about it from travel magazines, imagining myself strolling along the Savannah River, but I'd always put it off, saving for more practical things. Now, I would go, and I'd use Ethan's credit card to pay for it. Not to steal, but to mirror his actions, to make him feel the loss of control he'd inflicted on me. It was a lesson, one he'd never forget. I planned meticulously, channeling my anger into precision. I booked a round-trip flight, reserved a room at a quaint hotel overlooking the river, and signed up for a guided tour of Savannah's antebellum homes. Every detail was deliberate, a reclaiming of my agency. As I packed my suitcase, a flicker of excitement stirred in my chest, mingling with the ache of betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The moment the plane lifted off, I felt a weight slip from my shoulders. Staring out at the endless sky, I realized I was doing this for me. Not for Ethan, not for Susan, not for anyone else. Just Eleanor Thompson, a woman who'd spent too long putting others first. Savannah welcomed me with open arms, its beauty surpassing every postcard I'd ever seen. I wandered cobblestone streets, the air thick with the scent of magnolias, and marveled at historic homes glowing in the golden light. I savored shrimp and grits at a riverside cafe, the flavors bursting with warmth, and treated myself to a hand-woven shawl from a local boutique. Each purchase, charged to Ethan's card, felt like a small act of defiance, a step toward reclaiming my worth. In the evenings, I sat by the river, watching the water reflect the fading sun. Those quiet moments brought clarity and questions. I thought of Ethan, wondering if he was angry, remorseful, or still oblivious. I thought of Susan, whose own pain had shaped him, and of myself, a woman who'd given so much that she'd forgotten how to receive. Could I forgive him? Did I want to? The answers eluded me, but the peace of Savannah gave me strength to face whatever lay ahead. One afternoon, as I listened to a street musician play jazz in Johnson Square, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Grandma, where are you? I'm getting alerts about charges on my card. What are you doing?" His words were laced with panic, and I allowed myself a small smile. He was feeling it, the loss, the vulnerability. I didn't reply. Instead, I tucked my phone away and let the music carry me, savoring the freedom of being answerable only to myself. Ethan's messages escalated over the next few days, each one more desperate. "This is insane, Grandma! You're stealing from me!" One read. "I'm calling the cops. You'll regret this," another declared. His threats didn't frighten me. I'd expected them, but they stirred a nagging doubt. Had I gone too far? Would this sever our bond forever? I pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the beauty around me, but they lingered, a shadow on my newfound joy. When I returned home after 8 days, the house was a wreck. Pizza boxes, empty soda cans, and a faint musty odor. Ethan was gone, but his presence lingered in the chaos. I spent the first day cleaning, scrubbing away the mess as if I could erase the pain he'd caused. That evening, he stormed through the front door, his face flushed with fury. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he shouted, pacing the living room. "Using my card? Running off like some teenager? You've ruined everything." I stood tall, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Ethan, you stole from me first. You took my savings, my security, and you mocked me for it. This was your lesson. You needed to feel what you did to me." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound, but his eyes betrayed fear. "A lesson? You're delusional. I'm taking you to court, Grandma. You'll lose this house. Everything." "Go ahead," I said, meeting his gaze. "But before you do, ask yourself why I had to do this. What kind of person steals from their own grandmother and thinks it's okay?" He froze, his jaw tight, then turned and slammed the door behind him. The silence that followed was deafening, and for the first time, I let myself cry. Not for him, but for the family we used to be, and the woman I'd let myself become. The weeks after Ethan's outburst were a test of endurance. He didn't call or text, and I wondered if I'd lost him for good. I filled my days with routine, book club meetings, weeding the garden, knitting scarves for the church's winter drive. But the emptiness gnawed at me. I'd stood up for myself, reclaimed my power, but the victory felt hollow. Ethan was family, and despite everything, I loved him. Had my lesson been too harsh? Had I pushed him beyond redemption? I confided in my friend Margaret from book club, a spry 70-year-old who'd seen her share of family drama. Over tea in her sunlit kitchen, she listened as I poured out my heart. "Eleanor," she said, her eyes kind but firm. "You did what you had to. That boy needed a wake-up call. But love doesn't mean letting him walk all over you. It means giving him a chance to change and giving yourself permission to heal." Her words stayed with me, a lifeline in the quiet nights when doubt crept in. I began to journal, writing letters to Ethan I never sent, pouring out my anger, my hope, my fear. It was cathartic, a way to untangle the knot of emotions he'd left behind. Slowly, I started to forgive. Not him, not yet, but myself for letting things get so far. One rainy evening, nearly 2 months later, my phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen, and my heart skipped. "Grandma," he said when I answered, his voice soft, almost broken. "Can I come over?" "I need to talk." When I opened the door, I barely recognized him. His shoulders slumped, his eyes red and weary, as if he'd carried the weight of the world. He stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his jacket, and said, "I'm so sorry, Grandma." I was wrong. About everything. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to try to make it right. I studied him, searching for the boy who'd hurt me. But all I saw was vulnerability, a young man grappling with his mistakes. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling, "you broke my heart. You took more than money. You took my trust. Words aren't enough. You have to show me you've changed." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I know. I've been seeing a counselor, trying to figure out why I did what I did. I was angry, at Mom, at the world, at myself, and I took it out on you. I'm working on it, Grandma. I just need a chance." I let him in, not because I fully trusted him, but because I saw a glimmer of the boy I'd once known. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd shared peach cobbler years ago, and talked until midnight. He told me about his counseling, his struggles with anger, and his guilt. I told him about my pain, my fear of losing him, and my need to protect myself. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. Ethan moved back in, but this time he was different. He found a job at a local auto repair shop, coming home greasy but proud, eager to share stories of engines and customers. He helped around the house without prompting, washing dishes, raking leaves, even surprising me with a repaired porch swing. He wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, times when his old defensiveness flared. But he caught himself, apologized, and kept trying. Our evenings became a ritual of connection. Over coffee or homemade soup, we talked about everything. His dream of owning a repair shop, my memories of teaching, the mistakes we'd both made. I opened up about the sacrifices I'd made for family, how I'd lost pieces of myself along the way. Ethan listened, really listened, and I saw him begin to understand the weight of his actions. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I pruned my roses, Ethan approached with a small velvet box. "Grandma," he said, his voice shy, "I saved up for this. It's not much, but I wanted you to have something to show I'm trying." Inside was a silver bracelet, simple but elegant, with a tiny heart charm. I clutched it to my chest, tears blurring my vision. "Ethan, it's beautiful," I whispered. "But it's not about gifts. It's about you being here, showing up. That's what matters." He hugged me, and for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of family, not the obligation, but the joy. Now, as I sit on my porch, the Carolina sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I reflect on the road Ethan and I have traveled. We're not perfect. There are days when old wounds ache, when I catch myself watching him warily, fearing he'll slip back into selfishness. But then he'll call from work to check on me, or I'll find him tending the garden I love, and I'm reminded of how far we've come. This journey has taught me that family isn't about endless sacrifice. It's about boundaries, respect, and the courage to forgive without forgetting. I've rediscovered Eleanor, not just the grandmother, but the woman who deserves to dream, to laugh, to live. Ethan is finding his path too, and though it's not always smooth, he's walking it with purpose. I think of Savannah, of those days when I reclaimed my spirit, and I'm grateful. Not for the pain, but for the strength it unearthed. Ethan and I are building something new, not the family we were, but the one we're becoming. And for the first time in a long time, I feel at peace, ready for whatever lies ahead. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and please share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what this story meant to you. Your voice matters, and I can't wait to connect with you all.